Good morning, dear friends. I think exam fever is going on lot of our exam going students. So that's why this quiz time has been allotted today. So we will start with quiz and then we'll come back to answers and we'll discuss why we thought that this should be the appropriate answer for particular question. So try to be interactive as much as possible. Never mind, it can be wrong. We all have done wrongs. So this is our case one. I will play the video. Please identify the structure seen in the picture and after identifying, please explain that what is your most appropriate diagnosis. Yeah, so please identify the structure seen in the video. You want me to continuously play it or this picture is okay for identification? Okay, so Amito says that it should run. So I think we'll spend 1 to 2 minutes on this video. Otherwise, we have to go ahead with the next slide. So anyone, what are we seeing there? What is happening? Okay, what is this view? Can we just come with the very good. It's a suprasternal view showing reverse flow in the arch. Reverse flow. Why did you say reverse flow, Sakshi? So it's very good that it's a suprasternal view. That's what first is the identification. So in exam, whenever a video is playing, let it be a cat or a eco picture, you have to first identify that in what view it is done. The angio or for that example, echocardiography, and for ECG standardization and all those things. So it is a suprasternal view. We can see that there is a thymus there. Sakshi, can you suggest that reverse flow in the arch, you have said? Yeah, it's a normal flow. Very good. It's a normal flow. So blue color flow we normally see in the arch. I'm very happy that you identified that it's an arch flow. It's very good. It's an arch flow. Then what else we are seeing? There is something which is running like this. A horizontal blue line, innominate vein. Very good. That's an innominate vein. So normally, innominate veins runs anterior and superior to the aorta. Whenever it runs beneath the aorta, we call it as retroaortic innominate vein, which mimics sometimes the anatomically right pulmonary artery, but the Doppler is the one which is going to suggest it's a venous Doppler or a arterial Doppler. So I'm very happy it's a innominate vein. So what is the abnormality? We have many participants. I request all of you to please actively type the answers. Let it be wrong, it's fine. I'm here only to explain the things. So should I tell the answer? Okay, so what we'll do, I have some explanatory slide on the next. We'll just go to that and then we'll come back here. So this is a suprasternal long axis view and you are seeing this kind of picture. We are seeing arch here, okay? Can everybody see arch here? That's how we see the formation of the arch. And then I have reversed my probe position. And then again there is a formation of the arch. Can everybody see this arch? So when in a normal long axis view there is a formation of arch, and when we reverse the probe position, that is 1 o'clock position, and still there is a formation of arch, it is very much suggestive of double aortic arch. That's very good. It's a double aortic arch. So what I showed in the first image, so I will just go back. So this view, this is a suprasternal, little bit modified high clavicular suprasternal view, where you are seeing this is one arch and this is the other arch. This is the right-sided arch, this is the left-sided arch, and in center there is a center, the echogenic structure what we are seeing is the trachea. So this is actually a double aortic arch depiction by echocardiography. And superiorly, as we can see that the innominate vein is running there. So for a double aortic arch, a CT scan is a confirmative, but echo suspicion is very important because all babies we can't send for CT scan who comes with the stridor or who have symptoms. So as we can see here, there are two arches that we can see beautifully in this computed tomography, and each arch gives ipsilateral neck vessels. So this is right side, this is left side, and we can see here that this is right carotid artery, this is right subclavian artery, this is left carotid artery, and this is left subclavian artery. So both the arches will give ipsilateral neck vessels. Sometimes it can be atretic, then it will mimic like right-sided arch with glomerulus diverticulum. Most of these scenarios, which arch is a dominant arch? Yes, very good, Sakshi. The right-sided arch is a dominant arch and it is little bit higher in position. Yes, it is most of the time the right arch is a dominant and it is superior in location. So in a surgical correction, most of the time they will ligate the left-sided arch, the narrowest portion, most likely between the ascending aorta and the arch of aorta, because that is what the area which is accessible. If any segment is a narrow or a stenotic segment in a left-sided arch, suppose there is a serious stenosis between the left subclavian and left carotid artery, then that area would be ligated so that to ensure the uniform blood flow to all the neck vessels. So what should be the counseling particulars of this patient? That was the first question. One of the first question was that how we are going to counsel this family, that there is a double aortic arch, right? They will require surgery. And what should be the counseling part? Anybody? So which syndrome it is commonly associated with? Double aortic arch. Yes, very good. It is commonly associated with Dijot syndrome, that is 22q11 deletion. And for a long-term prognosis, we have to explain the family that this can be one of the possibility, and typical facial features may not be present at birth. So genetic analysis for microdeletion is very important. And as well, they have thymic deficiency. So sometimes we may have to give irradiated blood during the surgical process if blood transfusion is required. And we have to also explain that for 1 to 2 years, there might be a possibility of repeated infection. So all those cares needs to be taken. They might be hypocalcemic. They may have calcium deficiency. So to insight into a Dijot syndrome, all babies who are associated with double aortic arch, we need to explain the family. So that was our first question. Now we'll just go back to our second. Now this is a 2-month-old baby who has got mild cyanosis, heart failure symptoms, so, and then there is an ECG. So what is our diagnosis, probable diagnosis? Tricuspid atresia without PS. Okay. Yelikar, why did you say that? Tricuspid atresia without PS. What is your supportive evidence? Left axis deviation, cyanosis and CCF. Okay, very good. So I agree that on ECG there is left axis deviation, there is minimal cyanosis and there is CCF. Okay, but is echo supportive of tricuspid atresia? Amito says that it is common AV canal. Okay, so Amitos, what is your supportive evidence? Why are you saying like that? Any other answers? Truncus. Okay. But Sakshi, are you seeing three components of truncus here? And truncus with left axis deviation is very uncommon, right? So, Sakshi, are you seeing three components of trunk? What are the three components of trunk? Systemic artery, pulmonary artery, coronary artery. Very good. So, a truncus by definition is the vessel which is going to supply systemic circulation, pulmonary circulation, and coronary artery circulation. Very good. But are you seeing that three circulation are happening from this vessel in this picture? No, it is not seen. So, okay, let us go again by basic. What is this view? So large inlet VSD with 5 leaflets, AV valve in short axis. Are you seeing 5 leaflets here? There is one very classical picture of common AV valve which is given in Moss and Adams, the standard textbook. It is also given in Snyder. It looks like, I will just stop here. Here in this view, we can see beautifully that there are 2 AV valves. And as I said, it can be any view, but in exam, yeah, there are 2 separate AV valves are very nicely seen here. So it is not a common AV valve, but Yelikar, you said tricuspid atresia. So since there are 2 AV valves are seen, do you still go with your diagnosis of tricuspid atresia? No. So there is one AV valve here, there is other AV valve here, there is one annulus, and then there is another annuli here. So there are 2 AV valves, and then there are 2 annuli. So it is definitely not a AV canal defect, because in a common AV valve we should see 5 leaflets, as Amitos has said. But there is definitely a large VSD, a very large VSD, which is forming almost like a single ventricle. So what I wanted to give a clue to all of you through this picture is, what does it mimic like? If you see a picture like this, what does it mimic like? So let us start from the basic that it is a short axis view, right? Short axis en-face view of AV valves. So en-face view of AV valve is very important in two occasions. One, if you want to differentiate whether it is common AV valve or there are two AV valves. So for that one reason, it is very important. And second, to identify the leaflets, individual leaflets and their morphology, because it is very nicely seen in the en-face view of subcostal en-face view of AV valve. So it is a kind of coronal view, and then there is little bit anterior tilt where we are seeing the outlet also to this chamber. So what I wanted to suggest by this picture is that there is a single ventricle, and in that ventricle the two AV valves are opening. So with there is a left axis deviation and frontal QRS axis, if you look at, it is not very concordant with the going with the left axis deviation. So absolutely there is no R wave, and there is small R wave in V5 and V6. So this kind of ECG is typically of single ventricle physiology, and this kind of echo where you are seeing that there is a single ventricle of dominant single ventricle with two AV valves opening into a single ventricle. So then what it makes to be a diagnosis of? There is one ventricle and two AV valve opening we are seeing in that ventricle. So as you can see in this picture, yes, DILV. So in a double inlet ventricle, there will be a dominant one ventricle, and if you do an en-face view of AV valve, you will see a picture like this, that both AV valves are going predominantly to a one ventricle, that is double inlet left ventricle. Very rarely it can be double inlet right ventricle as well, or a double inlet ventricle of undifferentiated or undeterminate morphology are also possible, less than 10%. And on ECG we can see that there is left axis deviation and hardly there are RV forces for 2-month-old child. So as we all know that double inlet left ventricle, the commonest subclinical subtype is unprotected pulmonary blood flow or no PS. So let us go to the next slide and see what it gives us. So again, this is a 4-chamber view. Does it confirm your diagnosis? Identify this. So I'm asking all the participants whether it is confirmative of your previous diagnosis or no. Yes. So this is a double inlet ventricle, and this small right-sided chamber, as we can see, is a rudimentary, probably should have been the rudimentary chamber, and the dominant ventricle is a left-sided ventricle. So this is a non-inverted type of double inlet left ventricle, whereas inverted type is the commonest variety, where LV will come on the right side and the rudimentary chamber is on the left side. So it's kind of L looping of ventricle, which is the commonest variation, but here the rudimentary chamber is on the right side and the dominant chamber, which is of left ventricle morphology, is on the left side. So the question is, what is the essential, what you want to do? This is a 2-month-old baby. He is having heart failure symptoms and he has got unprotected pulmonary blood flow. So now what you want to do next? PA banding. Very good. before he develops any life-threatening infection, we have to do PA banding. So before doing PA banding, what is the most important feature that you want to look at in the echo before sending a baby for PA banding in this patient? Very good. I agree with Sakshi that identification of the size of bulboventricular foramen. Bulboventricular foramen is a communication between a rudimentary chamber and a dominant ventricular chamber, which otherwise is like a ventricular septal defect, but a rudimentary chamber is no more a ventricle. It doesn't have an inlet, so we are not going to call the defect as a ventricular septal defect. Instead, we call it as a bulboventricular foramina. So if there is a restriction of bulboventricular foramen and the aorta is coming from bulboventricular foramen, like in the second view, that the aorta is arising anteriorly, the PA is arising posteriorly, and aorta is coming from here, the rudimentary chamber. So if this communication is small, then this patient can have a subaortic obstruction after you do PA banding. So once when there is unprotected pulmonary blood flow, the subaortic obstruction is usually masked. They are not presented. The most of the blood will preferentially go to the pulmonary artery because the vascular resistance is less. But once you band the pulmonary artery, the blood tries to pass towards this bulboventricular foramina, and then it can be presented as hypovolemic state or a state of shock after doing PA banding. So we have to enlarge subaortic area if this area is narrowed up. Now sometimes what happens that this area will not be critically narrowed, but after doing PA banding we can see that there is a subaortic conus. This becomes hypertrophic and then it can give obstruction even later on. So during first stage of surgery, that is PA band, or during second stage of surgery, that is a Glenn surgery, we have to look out if there is a subaortic narrowing, because this patient might present with a state of shock or a decompensated state after doing the surgery because of subaortic obstruction. As well, we have also to look for, we should also look for the coarctation of aorta. Again, that can be masked if there is a ductus arteriosus associated. So coarctation of aorta and subaortic narrowing we should look for before sending a patient for PA band. So very good answers. And what is the age group that, what age you want to send them for PA band? Now this patient is 2 months. If this patient would have been 6 months, do you still consider a PA band? So this patient, if it is a 6-month child, what is the ideal age for PA band? Yes, very good. So it is 1 to 2 months is the ideal age for PA band. So by 1 month of age or by 6 weeks of age, the neonatal PVR drops in a large post-tricuspid shunt, and before they develop any life-threatening infection or before they develop pulmonary vascular disease, we should do banding to protect the pulmonary flows. So now, since we have to prepare this patient for single ventricle pathway, it is very important to tighten them enough so that they are suitable for single ventricle path in the future. If we do this banding at 6 months of age, maybe we reduce the incidence of respiratory tract infection, but not necessarily this patient will become suitable for single ventricle path. That is the PA pressure. We want the ideal PA pressure is less than 15 millimeters of mercury. We don't know we will be able to achieve or not. So that area is debatable. To prevent respiratory tract infection, one may advise banding, but we don't know that in future they will become suitable for single ventricle path or not. So please don't ask these patients to wait like 3 months of age, 4 months of age, because vascular disease may set in and we may not achieve the ideal PA pressures that we want for the single ventricle path. So we'll go to the next presentation. Next slide. This is the two angios. So first angio, please identify the catheter position. And what do you think that how this child would have presented? Oh, we are running heavily out of time. It's already half an hour. I request anybody, please answer. Let it be wrong, it's fine. So identify catheter position. Very good. It is IVC, RA, RV, and RPA. Excellent. Catheter is in right pulmonary artery. Excellent answer. So, what do you think? What should have been the? What would have been the mode of presentation? What is happening actually? Once you have given contrast, solve like a puzzle. That contrast communication with LA. Excellent. Yeah. Why did you say that, Amol? Yeah, Amol, please go ahead and explain your answer. Why did you say that? Filling of LA, LV, and aorta. Very good. So once you have given injection into the right pulmonary artery, you're filling actually left ventricle, and then you're also filling the aorta. And in between bronchi, if you look at, we are seeing the filling of left atrium, which is quite dilated. Now look at the second angio. Now what has happened? What has happened here? So actually what, again please follow like a puzzle that the contrast injection has been given into the right pulmonary artery, and there is a device. Where is the device this? Where is this device located? Yeah. So actually this device is located between the communication of right pulmonary artery to left atrium. So why this angio has been given? What is the importance of this angio? Most of the time we give LV angio for VSD after VSD device closure. Why do we give that? Like any other angio you explain? Yeah. So one is obviously to confirm that there are no residuals, but also to yeah, there is no right pulmonary obstruction. Yeah. So this is what we have to do it, that to confirm that there is no right pulmonary artery obstruction. But in one of the variety of right pulmonary artery to LA fistula, there will be upside distal pulmonary venous communication as well. So to confirm that the pulmonary venous connection is existing from pulmonary artery to left atrium, this injection has been given. So we can see that the right pulmonary artery is supplying the right lower lobe, and then there is a filling of right pulmonary veins as well. So that confirms that the pulmonary veins are patent. It is a very rare entity. So what do you think how this child would have presented? PVH, pulmonary vascular hypertension. Why? Yeah, cyanosis, very good. So if you, they usually present with contrast because there is a complete mixing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood which is happening from right pulmonary artery to the left atrium. So mode of presentation is cyanosis, clubbing without a murmur or a very faint murmur that you're observing, but most of the time cyanosis or clubbing without a significant murmur. So same thing has been confirmed by CT scan that this is a right pulmonary artery and this is the fistulous communication. Now let us look at the next picture. This is a 5-year-old girl who has been referred as multiple muscular VSDs. So please tell your diagnosis. So obviously we can see that there are multiple muscular VSDs. I think we can take like one by one. I will go by participant one by one. Amitos, yeah, you please take this and just describe what are you seeing. There is one ECG, there is one echo. You start from that. Amitos. Or in between anybody is getting answer, you can do that. So we'll go one by one. Dr. Amitos, can you please go ahead and just type the things what you are finding. Explain your findings. Or anybody in between coming with the answer. Okay, ECG. Let us start with the ECG. No, 12 lead 4 channel ECG with normal standardization, normal voltages. What are we finding on the ECG? Anybody, please. Is this ECG normal for the 5-year-old? Yes, very good. There is left ventricular dominance which is seen. Very good. And I agree that there is leftward axis for 5 years. There are hardly any very small r for 5 years seen in the V1 and V6 there is no S wave. So there is absent Q waves in V5, V6. Okay. What else? So is it concordant with the VSD? Is it going with the VSD? Since Amitos says no, it is not going with the VSD. But I said that there are multiple muscular VSDs. So that's why there are LV voltages. And you can see here that there are multiple muscular VSDs. Amitos, tell me one thing. Are you going with this diagnosis that it is multiple small VSDs together make a moderate shunt? Okay. Sakshi says that shunt is more and that's why there are LV voltages. Okay, now let us look at the ECG one by one. That there is leftward axis. It is normal sinus rhythm. There are small R wave in V1. There is no S wave in V6. So What is a ventricular looping? Clockwise. Why did you say clockwise? Where are the Q waves seen? So if you look at the Q waves are seen in 1 and AVL. Normally, do you see Q waves in 1 and AVL? Yes, it is counterclockwise loop. Very good. So counterclockwise loop with leftward axis, is it going now with the VSD? Is it going with the VSD? Okay, so now I would like to explain you all of you this echo picture. This patient was referred as multiple VSD, but as you can see here, on the interventricular septum, we are hardly seeing anything crossing, and to label it as a ventricular septal defect, the shunt happens only during systolic phase of cardiac cycle. But if you look at the color flow here, it is like uniform. It has been happening, the color flow is like continuous. So I'm just going frame by frame. The flow is like continuously happening across. Again, we can see that there is a color flow. But can you see that there is a color flow crossing from left ventricle to the right ventricle in any of this picture? Again, this is on the interventricular septum. On the interventricular septum. So, to be honest, this flow is not during the systole. It is like a continuous kind of flow which is happening. The ECG showing that the lead 1 there is a deep Q, lead 1 there is a Q wave, AVL there is a Q wave, there is leftward axis deviation. So all these things are definitely not going with the 5-year-old child with the VSD. So let us see what is the other picture suggests. This is the 4-chamber view. Now what is the final diagnosis? Yes, Sakshi, it's Alkapa. So what you were seeing actually on the interventricular septum, where what? So were they still VSD? You think there are Alkapa with VSD? Yeah, they were coronary collaterals. So what happens is, in Alkapa, especially like a 5-year-old child, where long-standing, or most of the Alkapa, 90% of them die by 1 year of age. So if they have survived beyond 1 year of age, they have to be a large collaterals from right coronary artery system into the left coronary artery system. So these collaterals are dilated, and that's why they give, and as you all know, this epicardial collaterals can be seen actually when we do a 4-chamber view. When they are dilated, they mimic like they are VSDs, but actually they are coronary collaterals. And if you place the Doppler there, you can easily identify the shunt is not happening during the systolic phase. It is a kind of diastolic flow which also persists to some extent into the systole. So please don't label all these patients as multiple VSDs, and sometimes you can even hear a continuous murmur, rarely, in a older patients of Alkapa due to large coronary collateral flows. So this patient had Alkapa with only mild ventricular dysfunction and mild mitral regurgitation. So what is the most characteristic finding you are seeing in the 4-chamber view? Yeah, ischemic papillary muscle, echogenic ischemic papillary muscle is the characteristic feature of, again, Alcapa. So just to emphasize that not all flows seen on the ventricular septum are VSTs. Please do not forget to take Doppler there and to notice that how the flow pattern is happening. They will not be uniform. You won't see any dropouts in the interventricular septum, and even you are not going to visualize any crossing over from left ventricle to right ventricle. And this ECG, probably the ECG was diagnostic with Q waves in one and AVL. I will never put this as a VST only. Definitely there has to be some other abnormality, especially to carefully look for coronary abnormality if there is a counterclockwise loop. So Alcapa, now again this is same Alcapa. There are two ECGs. What do you think? What has been happened to this patient? Why there? It is the same patient. So are ECGs similar? Are they same ECGs? So again, you have to look for same characteristics features like we discussed that one and AVL, there are deep Q waves, and second ECG, there are no Q waves in lead 1 and there is very small Q wave in AVL. Then if you look at the V6, there was deep Q waves in V6, and in second ECG, in fact, there is a R wave, the S wave, which is going deeper, but there is no Q wave, significant Q waves in V5 and V6. So what do you think? What has happened with this patient? So this patient has undergone Alcapa surgery, that is coronary button transfer. And this ECG is a pre-op ECG where we are seeing all characteristic features that there are deep Q waves in V5 and V6, there is counterclockwise loop, there is no R in AVR that suggests that there was no significant ischemia. There is tall T wave in again V6, but otherwise there is no significant ST depression. All these features have been reversed after the surgery. So Alcapa, after surgery, over the 6 months period of time, this patient has almost recovered ventricular function, and all features of the strain on the myocardium has been reversed back to the normal. It may take a longer duration to reverse back the ventricular function, but predominantly ECG features have been reversed over the 6 month period time. So surgery really gives rewarding results, and you should never ever miss an Alcapa patient because it's a treatable disease and it really gives rewarding results after treatment. So quickly we'll take this. Okay, now I request Sakshi to take this. Just describe the angio, maybe catheter position, we can start with that. You are in IVC, RA, RV, and into the PA. The pigtail angio is given into the main pulmonary artery. Then what do you think? Which view is this? LAO, yes, because spine is rotated towards left side. Now what is happening? Okay, I will freeze the best informative picture. Okay, so I have frozen the now. LPA sling. Very good, Sakshi. So it is the left pulmonary artery which is arising from right pulmonary artery. We can see in this angiogram. Yeah, so this is right pulmonary artery. Normally left pulmonary artery in LAO view comes from main pulmonary artery, but here we can see that it is taking an angle coming from right pulmonary artery, going posteriorly and then going on the left side. This patient also had ventricular septal defect, membranous of moderate size. So we did CT scan and it confirmed the same thing, that this is the left pulmonary artery which is arising from right pulmonary artery. So Sakshi, just tell me one thing, why it is called as sling and not ring? Is it a vascular ring or a sling? Or anybody who would like to answer? Yes, very good. It doesn't completely encircle the airway. So vascular ring is an abnormality where the airways and esophagus are completely covered from all directions from the vascular structure. They can be patent or they can be atretic, like sometimes ductus arteriosus, ligamentum arteriosum completes the vascular ring. Whereas in LPS ring, it doesn't encircle the airways and esophagus, so it is called as LPA sling and not ring. They usually have minimal kind of presentations like some respiratory tract infection, but they are not as symptomatic as classical vascular rings. So they are often missed if echocardiography is not been done properly, like to see from where the left pulmonary artery is coming. So very good. That was left pulmonary artery sling. Okay, too much of angiography. We will skip those pictures. Now, who will take this? Ni3 Yelikar. Can you please take this? In between, if anybody would like to answer, please do that. Now you identify the trace, and what do you think? What is your diagnosis? Oops, the answer was there. Identify the trace. Actually, it is labeled. RV to PA simultaneous. Why did you say it's RV? The notching is seen on the left ventricle, right? We can see on this trace that there is a notching. Sorry, we went out of sound in between. So I can see the answers. Sakshi has said supravalvular AS, very good. And it is LV to aorta pullback and supravalvular AS. That's the right answer. We can obviously see that the LV pressures are more than 200. And then there is an ascending aortic trace above the valve, and then from ascending just above the valve we have come further towards ascending aorta, and then there is a significant obstruction. The noteworthy point here is the diastolic pressures are uniformly maintained from proximal part of the obstruction to the distal part of the obstruction, whereas the systolic pressures have been changed. So the proximal part, there is a significant white pulse pressure, but the obstruction is predominantly supravalvular AS. That's very good. So what is the commonest association with supravalvular AS? Yeah, very good. It's a Williams syndrome. And do you routinely do angiography for supravalvular AS? Peripheral PS, very good. Yes. What else? They have generalized arteriopathy. So systemic hypertension is one more associated association with the Williams syndrome and supravalvular AS, but yeah, renal artery stenosis. So they have profound incidence of arteriopathy like renal artery, carotid artery, and incidence of hypertension is also high with Williams syndrome. But non-Williams syndrome and non-familiar form of Williams syndrome may not have these features of peripheral PS or generalized arteriopathy. But I want to ask all of you, do you routinely do angiography for supravalvular AS? Should we do angiography for supravalvular AS? Here the angiography is done. Yeah, it is not recommended. Can you explain why it is not recommended? So supravalvular AS have been also associated with abnormalities of coronary artery origin. Coronary ostia can be stenosed. They may have elliptical opening. Yes. So coronary ostial stenosis, which is associated. So during angiography and catheter manipulation, if they may develop stun phenomena, or the coronaries may go into spasm, and because of that there can be serious myocardial stunning, and then it will be very difficult to revive them because they already have distal obstruction. So it is not recommended. Here it was done because as you can see that this patient is already post-operative state, and surgery was done for supravalvular AS in a Williams syndrome. And to differentiate whether it is a valvular stenosis or it is a supravalvular stenosis, that was difficult to diagnose by other modalities. So the angiography was planned. But this is usually it is not recommended because of coronary ostial stenosis. So what is the genetic mutation associated with the disease, with the Williams syndrome? Elastine gene, chromosome 7. It is 7q11 deletion. It is very easy to remember q11 part because it also goes with the Dijot syndrome. So this is a trick. Dijot syndrome, it is 22q11. Here it is chromosome 7q11 and elastine gene. Very good. Now let us take this angiography. Diagnosis, please. And second question is why it was performed. Amol Gupta says that it is Scimitar syndrome. Yes. Any other answer? Scimitar syndrome. Okay. So just explain why the second angio was done. First is good that it is a Scimitar syndrome. So catheter injection is into the distal right pulmonary artery, and LEVO phase is showing that there is a pulmonary venous return to the IVC, the suprahepatic part of the IVC, and we can see the filling of the hepatic veins, IVC, and the right atrium. So this entity is called as Scimitar syndrome. So why the second angio was done. I'll just play. So, aortogram is usually needed in this patient to rule out bronchopulmonary collateral. There is association of sequestration of lung, a part of lobe of the lung associated with the schemata syndrome. So that's why aortogram was done to see if there are any collaterals supplying the pulmonary, the part of lung. Usually it supplies the right lower lung, but it can supply anywhere, and it comes from the thoracic part of the aorta. But here, if you look at this angio, that there is right renal artery which is giving collateral. So I will just go back here. So this is the right renal artery, and if you look at this vessel which is traveling upwards and supplying the lower part of the lung. So this here the collateral has been supplied actually from the right renal artery, which is little bit uncommon. So again, we can just skip these pictures. Okay. Anybody would like to take up this and tell me the diagnosis? This is a newborn who is presented with respiratory distress and he had desaturation. So this baby was in a neonatal unit and they have sent us this samples. Do you think there is a cardiac disease or there is no cardiac disease? This patient is on ventilator. I think we have hardly 5 more minutes to go. The baby is on ventilator presented. Yes, there is a cardiac disease. Yes. So what is the most likely cardiac disease? There are others like Rajesh Kumar. Please explain. DTGA. Okay. Why did you say it's DTGA, Amol? Umbilical arterial SpO2. It is very, very minimal. If you look at the PO2s, they are almost the same. If it is has to be DTGA, then hardly there is a shunting happening, right? Because it is almost the same. There is not much difference. And characteristically, what happens in DTGA? The right radial and umbilical artery, if you look at these saturations, the right radial and the umbilical artery PO2s, they are precisely more or less equal. It is 38.8 and here it is 36. So what happens if there is a ductus arteriosus? So the lower limb saturations can be mildly better than the upper limb saturation. But is that thing happening here if there is a large ductus communication? With a restrictive ductus, again, we will not see that finding in DTGA because the systemic blood flow, the oxygenation of the systemic blood flow predominantly will depend on the interatrial communication. So precisely you will have more or less similar saturations in right radial and umbilical artery. If there is only a large ductus which is shunting bidirectional, then you may have relatively better saturations in lower limb. That's how the fetal circulation happens. The lower limb saturations in a fetal circulation with DTG are better than the upper limb circulation. So can you see that precisely the all three saturations are same? What does it say? In what condition all the saturations will be equal? Yes, TAPVC, very good. It is usually a TAPVC which will have all saturations equalization. Now, what do you think where this TAPVC is draining? Normally, do you expect umbilical venous saturation to be so high, 72%? Yeah, ductus venosus, very good. So likely that it is draining into the ductus venosus and the sample has been taken distal to ductus venosus, and that's why there is equalization of all the three samples. So it is infracardiac type of TAPVR. And one more point against DTJ is usually the newborns will be quite asymptomatic initial day 1 or day 2 period because of the with the DTGA patients where ductus arteriosus is present and foramen ovale is also adequately shunting. It is the over the period of time like 1 week or so when ductus is closed, the foramen is also restricting, then the systemic oxygenation is not happening adequately, and then they present with respiratory distress, and the distress is usually a metabolic cause. There will be severe metabolic acidosis. Whereas in intracardiac type of TAPVR, there is severe obstruction to the pulmonary venous drainage, and there is a pulmonary venous obstruction. So that makes them symptomatic from day 1 and day 2 of life itself. So typical X-ray will mimic like HMD. Like we can see here, there is going to be a reticular form in the lungs, and this is diagnostic of infracardiac type of TAPVR. Now, 1 second. Yeah. Probably we'll take this as the last slide. Anybody would like to take up this ECG? Long QTC, very good, Sakshi. It is long QT syndrome, and usually it will be if you just have a overlook at the ECG, it will look pretty normal, like sinus rhythm, normal ventricular forces. But in all pediatric patients, please do not forget to measure their QT and QTC, and it is probably the most important feature, and if it is missed, then it can be life-threatening to patient. So just to emphasize that, this is long QT syndrome. So just few points on long QTC that how to measure that. It is Bézard's formula, QT divided by root of previous RR interval. It should be taken and lead to, because there the Q, T and the R waves are better appreciated. So there is a tangent method, you might all be aware of this, which is more precise and false positivity is less with the tangent method. So you have to draw a line according to the perpendicular to the end of the T wave and a horizontal line from the first deflection of the QRS axis, and that you should measure as a distance for QT. So what is the commonest gene mutation associated with long QTC? We all know it is a genetic disorder, and yeah, it is KCNQ1. Very good. It is the commonest genetic mutation. And what is the mode of inheritance? Autosomal dominant. Okay. Anybody else? So both autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive are known. There are KCNQ1 is the commonest genetic mutation, and autosomal recessive Jarvell-Lange-Nielsen syndrome. It is a very severe form, and Romano-Ward is a autosomal dominant. And there are two other syndromic associations with long QTC, that is Anderson-Tawil syndrome. All these patients will be syndromic. They have facial syndromic features, and they have extra cardiac manifestations as well. So they are more easily identifiable, but Romano-Ward and Jarvell-Lange-Nielsen syndrome, one of them present with deafness, and which one presents with deafness out of this? Romano-Ward or Jarvell-Lange-Nielsen? With deafness, without deafness? Jarvell. Yeah, so it presents with deafness. So again, it is easy to identify, but Romano-Ward, they are precisely normal children, but they will have this kind of disease where there will be a long QTC, and it can be lethal if it is missed. So there are some more slides, but we will skip with the interest of time. If there are any questions, we can take that. I thank you all for your participation, and I really give all the best to all of you. Hopefully you will do well in your exams. So if there are any questions, we can take it. Otherwise, we'll